This one chokes me up every time. It's not only physically brutal, but emotionally brutal. Like so many superhero defeats that stick with me truly seem to be. In this case, it is Superman himself who is defeated by his friend and ally Wonder Woman. This all goes down in the story from outside of the main continuity, Wonder Woman Dead Earth. In this comic, Diana awakens in a post-apocalyptic world, where she seems to have forgotten what happened to the planet. There was a great war, and following it a great fire, and it is in issue 3 that she actually finds out the truth about what happened to this now dead Earth, and her involvement in that. What happened was the Great Fire, and the Great Fire was her. In the past, in Dead Earth, the Amazons attacked humankind, and while Diana attempted to lead peace talks between both sides, this ultimately fails, and then the humans decide to basically nuke Themyscira. Diana's full power is unleashed when her bracelets are removed, but it's not enough to stop the nuclear strike against her home. In the end, her mom, her sisters, her entire world are all destroyed and lost to her. Superman rushes to help, but also arrives too late after prioritizing his own parents, who also were victims of a nuclear attack in Smallville. Her power fully unleashed, heartbroken and filled with rage, Wonder Woman takes out her frustrations on Superman. The two fight, and ultimately this untethered and unlimited power that Diana has tapped into proves to be enough for her to destroy Clark after their fight also has obliterated the Earth via collateral damage. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button? I know there's a bunch of you that aren't subscribed, so you know, if you want to subscribe, it helps us out. Number 9. The Justice League are dead. Welcome to Dark Crisis. Or really, welcome to Justice League issue number 75, the beginning of Dark Crisis. In this issue, the Justice League goes up against Pariah. Pariah used to be a scientist trying to stop the death of universes, who basically became corrupted when he was cursed to watch worlds end over and over again without being able to do anything to save them. I mean, to be fair, that would, I think, make pretty much anyone corrupted and kinda crazy. Pariah is back, and this time he intends to end the suffering of the multiverse by ending the heroes of the main continuity. He does this because he believes in destroying the main continuity he'll kind of be able to end the cycle of destruction, seeing it as kind of the root of the problem because the heroes from that reality have in essence meddled too much with the state of the multiverse. So he's like, in order for us to save the multiverse, we kinda gotta get rid of you guys. As a result, he seemingly handily defeats the Justice League in one go, blasting them with his own power after making them fight sort of the darkness, which is like an army of evil characters they fought before, but really it's just the darkness, leaving only Black Adam to survive, return to Earth, and tell the tale of what happened. Of course, the Justice League would return because, you know, this is comics, we gotta come back around to it. But still, this issue and their initial fate here was pretty wild. Number 8, and that will be the end of the X-Men Forever! What can I say? I'm a sucker for the classics. This one comes to us from the old days of X-Men, the Jack Kirby and Stan Lee days. In issues number 17 and 18 of Uncanny X-Men, Magneto is revealed to be the villain who has infiltrated the X-Mansion, having returned from outer space where we last saw him be transported to by the Beyonder. He has returned to once more resume getting revenge on the X-Men and mankind. It isn't until the end of issue 17 that Magneto is revealed as he greets the parents of Warren Worthington III, aka mutant student Angel's parents, having handily defeated almost all the X-Men one by one after luring them to the mansion. Magneto's plan is to send them up in an air balloon, which is basically like attached to a metal ball that contains them. Fortunately, while initially defeated in issue number 17 and struggling to escape in issue number 18, Iceman ends up getting showcased as the true hero in this issue. Kinda helps save the day here, almost single-handedly defeating Magneto just as the X-Men escape their deadly air balloon fate and return to back him up. Number 7. You Are Not My Father. Probably one of the most emotional fights, especially when we consider that at the time we had a lot of complex emotions about, well, at least one of these people, happens between Professor Charles Xavier and his star pupil, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. I'll let you guess about who he had complex feelings about. This one went down during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. It happens at a tense time in the history of the X-Men, not just because they were up against and at conflict with the Avengers as a result of a debate about what to do with the incoming Phoenix Force, but because of the revelations that had happened in recent years in regards to Charles's more shady practices. Like, not telling his students that the danger room they were training in had actually itself become a sentient AI mutant who was in essence kind of being oppressed by the headmaster of the Xavier Institute, for example. In the end, Charles attempted to talk down Scott, who at this point had the full power of the Phoenix Force, or he takes the full power of the Phoenix Force during this fight, and uses it at his fingertips. Basically, he was also being corrupted by that. Himself filled with a bunch of complex feelings at the time in regards to Charles, Cyclops ends up refusing his once mentor's help, and instead kills him in a blaze of phoenix flames. Despite the fact that Charles at this point was a controversial figure, he was still, I would say, considered to be more hero than villain. And despite the fact that Cyclops himself is usually known for being a hero, he still defeated a man often also known for his own heroic and idealistic dreams. Number 6. The day the proudest, most noble man ever finally fell. Obviously, I'm kinda trimming down that quote a bit, but it just fits a little bit better in my point. What an iconic defeat. So iconic it not only shook the comic book world, but also the everyday world as well, making headlines. And sure, all in all, this was kind of a publicity stunt to help boost comic sales, but it also became a huge story for comic book fans everywhere to look back on for years to come. While Superman would return, his defeat against Doomsday and ultimate initial death in the comics would be felt the world over. The death of Superman is epic, and I personally always like coming back to it, not just for Clark himself, but for the characters that are a big part of his world. Lois and Jimmy, his parents, John and Martha. Ugh, makes me feel so many emotions. Also, why was Jimmy so handsome in the 90s? I ask myself that every time I return to Superman comics in the 90s. I'm like, Jimmy, you're looking real jacked. Number 5. Take heart, Kitty. Oof, this one hits me right in the feels. I go back to what it felt like the first time I read this one, and whoo, it got me. This defeat comes to us from the pages of one of my favorite ever X books, I believe, the first volume of Marauders, which started back in 2019. I think this is one of my favorite X books of all time. I mean, I'd have to really think about that and rank those, but pretty sure this is up there if it's not in the top 5. Although, I think it is in the top 5 for me. In issue number 6, we're caught off guard when Sebastian Shaw shows up on a boat where Captain Kate, the leader of the Marauders, has been left alone. Now for those who haven't been keeping up with, the Krakoa era X-Men stuff and what it means for Kitty Pryde, initially she had problems using the gates on the island and basically became the captain of a ship and the leader of the Marauders. Not Sinister's Marauders, not those Marauders. She was reclaiming the name for a heroic group of buccaneers that would basically sail the seas and help to free mutants in countries where they otherwise were not free, helping to bring them to Krakoa. And honestly, the team is also star-studded. Here, Kitty preferred to go by Kate. That is, until she died. Sebastian Shaw shows up to attack Kate with fast-growing Krakoa seeds. Considering she can't use the gates and currently can't phase through Krakoan materials, Kate becomes restrained as a result. Lockheed is netted and tossed overboard, and Kate is left to sink alone, along with the ship she is on, which Sebastian of course blows a hole in. This plot point is made even more devastating by the implication that Kate will not be able to be resurrected, as this plot point is made even more devastating by the implication that Kate will not be able to be resurrected by the Five as a result of her inability to interact with Krakoan gates. Number 4. Everything Cracked. The Final Crisis story is all about the brutal defeat of superheroes and really kind of like everyone on Earth. Final Crisis was the story of how Darkseid basically took over the world by broadcasting the anti-life equation to everyone on the planet via email, text, radio, and television broadcasts, basically making them realize that he is the one true ruler of everything, and so they may as well just give up and surrender to him. It was brutal, devastating, and honestly affected pretty much everybody in the comics. Eventually the heroes would manage to rise up and take back the planet, but for a while there, it was really bleak. Things got so bad that they even caused Batman to break his one rule against using guns in order to take on Darkseid. And this event started with the death of Martian Manhunter as well. Rough. Number 3. The one true enemy of the great Charles Xavier. Oh boy, we are going to the Ultimate Universe for this one, so you know it's gonna be brutal, right? This comes from the Ultimate X-Men series. Here, Sinister, who looks super different in this universe, so if you're like, wait a minute, who's that? That's Sinister? Yeah, it is. He infiltrates the X-Mansion and manages to sneak up on Charles Xavier himself, despite his immense telepathic powers. Xavier here is no match for Sinister, who takes him out of the security room he was in, where he was seemingly surveying his students. When Charles asks Sinister where he's taking him, Sinister responds that he's escorting Xavier to his one true enemy, and then he pushes him down some stairs. It's completely awful, really. Xavier isn't the only one who gets brutally and honestly insultingly messed up by Sinister in this issue. Angel also in this fight goes from being intimidating in one panel to basically mentally manipulated into choking himself against his will in another panel. So yeah, which I mean, I don't know. I kind of expect something like that for Angel, but Xavier? It's not fair. It's not very, that's terrible. Number 2, instead I will simply break you. Possibly one of the most powerful moments I've ever read in Batman comics. This epic issue that was an integral part of the Nightfall story is a whirlwind of a fight. And not only that, but overseen by a powerful inner monologue from Batman about all the wounds he has taken to get to this point. That truly highlights the struggles that really sum up this character, who against all odds always comes out on top, right? Not this time. In issue number 497 of Batman, this was the moment that Bruce fell in his fight against Bane. Bane came to finish him, but rather than kill Batman, decided to simply leave him broken, breaking his back over his knee in that massive and iconic splash panel. Number 1, but I saved you. I did it. This one made me cry all over again as I sat at my desk and reflected on it, revisiting it again. Oh boy, okay. So here we're talking about the death of Spider-Man, which honestly happened more than once in the Ultimate comic book line and universe, but I do think that this is my favorite death. This is Spider-Man's death done right, is what I mean, in my mind. If you have to do it, obviously, because I don't think many of us would really ask for something this heartbreaking to happen, but you know, here we are, it happened, and it's so sad. During Ultimate Spider-Man issue 159 through to issue 160, we see Peter in his final fight. In the final moments of this final fight, unmasked and with nothing really left to lose, he is forced to give it his all to protect the people of New York City, and more specifically, his friends, his family, his loved ones, and the people of his own neighborhood. In the end, despite everything he does in this epic fight, which spans multiple issues, he is defeated by the Green Goblin. And the ultimate version of the Green Goblin is an unstoppable, and as we'd later find out, immortal tank of a villain. This fight and defeat has it all though. Ups, downs, it's an emotional, action-packed roller coaster. And while Spider-Man does seemingly die, so seemingly does Norman Osborn as well in the end. So while this is a defeat, there's also at least some poetic justice felt in the end too. But goodness, Aunt May, whew, boy do I feel for Aunt May here. Oh, it's so awful.
Number 10. Batman gets punched out by Hal Jordan. Batman had a hard time getting along with the Green Lantern after his murderous incarnation as Parallax. The tension between these two came to a head in Green Lantern Rebirth, when Hal decides he's pretty much fed up with Batman's paranoia and he just socks him one. A real mean right hook right to the jaw. Batman drops from the single blow unconscious. Guy Gardner happens to be nearby, who Batman basically did the same thing to in Justice League number 5, just a one shot, boom. He's pretty happy to see Batman get what's been coming to him. It's certainly not Batman's worst defeat by a pretty wide margin, but it's definitely a serious blow to Batman's pride as well as his face, since he's basically just been knocked out with a single punch from a regular human. Then again, Batman doesn't exactly have like superpowered endurance or anything, so it does make sense that he could be brought down in one punch. What really gets me going is if Batman was so paranoid, why didn't he see this punch coming? World's greatest detective gets blindsided?
And before we continue, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on our video because it goes a long way for us here at the studio. And if you don't do it, we're gonna be really sad for like an entire year, so. Number 9, Jason Todd. A Death in the Family is a 4-part storyline written by Jim Starlin and published in 1988, and it's one of the biggest DC moments ever in comic history. This was a huge moment in the Bat story because we see the Joker beat the second coming of Robin, Jason Todd, and when I say he beats him, I mean he beats him like to death. Yeah, he gets a crowbar and then a bomb just to end it all off. And it's more than just a beating that's so horrible. The Joker also used Jason's birth mother. Yeah, he blackmailed her in order to get closer to Jason. And then of course the Joker killed her too. So this is a double whammy. All the defeats, all the feels, our hearts. And what's even crazier about this whole thing is that it was up to the fans to decide his fate. Yeah, this actually came to life thanks to the producers allowing the readers to decide what happens next. There was a 36-hour period with a number you could call and vote for if you wanted the Joker to kill Robin or not. And it was pretty close apparently, something like 72 votes a difference, which is wild. Some fans even admitted to calling in more than once. You know, they just really wanted him out of there, eh? And this was of course a blessing in disguise because it brought us the glorious Red Hood, who we can't help but love.
Number 8. Spider-Man vs. Mysterio. When Mysterio first appeared way back in 1964, he gave Spidey a real run for his money. In this story, reports of Spider-Man robbing different stores in the night are hitting the news. Pete becomes pretty worried and thinks maybe he's going crazy, committing crimes in his sleep or something. He even considers visiting a psychiatrist at one point, but decides against it, fearing that he might ruin his secret identity. Later, a costumed being calling himself Mysterio appears at the Daily Bugle and tells Jameson that he's a crime fighter and he's here to bring Spider-Man to justice. He vanishes in a puff of smoke, leaving a note telling JJ to publish a challenge for Spider-Man to meet Mysterio on the Brooklyn Bridge for a showdown. The battle that follows is a particularly bitter defeat for Spidey, as Mysterio uses his special effects expertise to counteract Spider-Man's webbing, causing it to melt, and messes with his spider sense using a powerful mist that deadens the senses and reduces Spider-Man's reactions. Spidey is also blinded by the mist. Afterwards, Mysterio has a great photo op with Jameson, being hailed as a hero for taking on the menace of Spider-Man. Spidey uses this opportunity to hit Mysterio with a spider tracer and follows him back to his base to learn the truth behind Mysterio's evil ways, to eventually later defeat him.
Number 7. Batman: The Dark Knight Rises. Directed by, of course, Christopher Nolan, who had done the previous 2 installments, comes a pretty epic conclusion to the hit trilogy. Released in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, as you guessed from the title alone, is about Batman rising up. But from where and why? Well, how about a broken back thanks to Bane, for starters? Yeah, this is 8 years after the Joker had a run-in with Gotham City, so now Batman has to return to take down Tom Hardy as he mumbles and frowns aggressively around town. So after Catwoman walked him into a 1v1 in the tunnels of Gotham, we get one of my favorite fight scenes from any superhero movie ever. And what I love about this scene the most is that there's no music the entire time. All you hear is Batman struggling to try and make a dent on this guy, and it makes it more realistic. There's no heroic music above that distracts you, it's just stressful. It's so stressful. I mean, you can see Bruce become more and more exhausted by the minute. Leaves you out of breath almost. And it all comes to a screeching halt when Bane picks up Bruce for one last blow, right to the spinal cord.
Spirit! Oh, your money!
Now, I know people give this movie a hard time, but seeing Batman get his ass kicked like this reminded me that it's not always the hero that gets the last punch.
Because they belong to me.
Number 6. Wolverine, crushed by the Punisher. The Punisher and Wolverine are a couple of rusty nails, real tough guys who don't take any guff and ask questions after the whooping is done. As such, when these guys go toe-to-toe in Punisher number 17 in 2001, they get straight to wrecking each other after a very short truce. They're both on the hunt for a guy who's been killing mobsters and leaving severed legs behind. Wolverine suspects the Punisher, and of course Punisher's prime suspect is Wolverine. These two guys have a pretty nasty showdown that does not end well for old Wolverine. Punisher literally shoots Logan's face off and then blasts him right between the legs with a machine gun. Wolverine is doubled over in pain on the ground, as you can imagine, and Punisher, realizing he can't really stop Wolverine just by hurting him, crushes Wolverine underneath a steamroller and parks it on Logan's head with just his hands sticking out. Some very effective work by the Punisher and a seriously humiliating defeat for Wolverine.
And number 5, Spider-Man and Craven. We take a look now at Craven's Last Hunt, published in 1987, and it has quite an interesting illustration on the front page. We see a dark suit Spider-Man crawling out of a grave covered in mud, and then in the background we read some alarming words on the tombstone, and it says, "Here lies Spider-Man." Huh, what? Okay, so this 5-part series, of course, as you would guess, centers around the death of Spider-Man in a way. But how does such a thing happen to old Sticky Pete? Well, Craven is frustrated after his failed attempts to catch Spider-Man, so he comes up with this all-new plan that involves him shooting Spider-Man. So Craven buries him, and even worse, he takes a Spider-Man suit and then takes his place in the world. So not only do you get defeated, but also replaced, adding insult to injury, literally. So then the new Spider-Man, our boy Craven, now he roams New York and brutally attacks criminals, including a group that was actually assaulting Mary Jane. So then 2 weeks later, Peter wakes up from the effects of the tranquilizer that Craven used, and he digs himself out to freedom. Now, I've woken up late, maybe I've missed a class or two before, but I mean this is just a whole nother level of stress. So when Spider-Man confronts Craven, Craven gets defensive. He's like, "Oh, no, buddy, I'm the real deal now, I'm doing this. You go back to your little hole. I'm doing the Spider-Man thing now, alright? Get out of here, bucko." And then Craven releases Vermin, who is just, a bundle of joy to hang out with. He attacks Peter thinking he was the same Spider-Man that had given him a beatdown before. And then Peter has to convince Vermin to cooler jets. Vermin is actually about to kill Peter until Craven intervenes. I mean, talk about a messy 2 weeks, holy shit.
Number 4. Cyclops Infinity War. Some of the heroes on this list got it pretty rough sometimes, and this defeat of Cyclops during the final battles in Infinity War is especially brutal. After Thanos had obtained the Infinity Gauntlet and performed his epic universe-altering snap, the remaining superheroes head off into space to battle against the Mad Titan. A lot of superheroes die, a testament to Thanos' epic power, but Cyclops suffers one of the worst deaths imaginable. Just as Cyclops uses one of his signature optic blasts, Thanos conjures an airtight, unbreakable cube around Cyclops' head, and, unable to use his blasts to free himself, Cyclops falls to the ground, suffocating in the cube. Captain America can't even break the cube open with a smash from his shield. A lot of the heroes who died in this event got it pretty quick. Even Cap is knocked out quickly with an epic backhand from Thanos that breaks his neck. This is a really tragic moment for all, but a super devastating defeat for Cyclops. I'm not even that big of a Cyclops fan, but the way this thing unfolded really made me feel for the guy.
Number 3, Magneto and Wolverine. Look, I bite my nails, alright, a lot. I can't even pull a hangnail some days, okay? I grab it, I count myself down, and then last minute I just bail. It's too spicy, I don't have enough willpower to do it. Now, I couldn't even imagine this next one, okay? I couldn't imagine if all of my bones got ripped out of my body at the same time. And that's exactly what happens to Wolverine when Magneto has had enough of his nonsense. So this all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event. Wolverine doesn't even have a chance to scream, apparently. The adamantium that bonded to his bones erupted outward like water bursting through a dam. That's how they put it. Ugh. And he's still breathing when this happens. I mean, if this isn't one of the worst things to go through, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, thankfully Xavier wiped Magneto's memory and then Wolverine was out of commission for a while. I mean, he had metal spikes sticking out of his body, so I don't think he's getting any grocery shopping done anytime soon.
Number 2. Superman gets beat by Alfred. Injustice, Gods Among Us had some pretty epic moments, like this crazy showdown between Batman and Superman that ends in a broken back for Batman. In this story, we visit an alternate DC universe in which Superman has gone mad and takes over the world as a dictator, after witnessing the destruction of Metropolis by the Joker and accidentally killing his pregnant wife. It's enough to drive anyone mad, really. Batman tries to stop Superman, eventually forming a rebellion against Superman's regime. Both are joined on either side by other heroes who share their feelings, and a superhero war rages on. Sometime after poor Batman has his back destroyed, Superman is confronted by Alfred, who has recently taken one of the superpowered pills Lex Luthor invented for Superman to use to create a superpowered army. What follows is an epic and totally unexpected beatdown as Alfred gets revenge for Batman, laying some serious blows on Superman with no remorse. Alfred cares deeply for Batman, and he really lets it show here, hammering Superman's head into the ground.
And number 1, Vision, Infinity War. Okay, so Patty D mentioned earlier a pretty brutal death from the Infinity War comic, but if you're not aware of the comic, maybe you'll remember this one from the movie. So the Russo brothers made what's arguably the best superhero film to date. I mean, all of these characters who led their own franchise crammed into one single movie. I'm honestly impressed by how smoothly that movie runs. So we see Thanos as he walks his way through the universe collecting the cosmic Infinity Stones. First he decimates Xandar for the Power Stone, and then gives Loki the old Chokey for the Space Stone, even popping some blood vessels in his face at the same time. He momentarily turns Drax and Mantis into silly string and flesh cubes, and he throws Gamora off of a cliff for the Soul Stone and stabs Iron Man, forcing Strange to hand over the Time Stone. But they save the best and most heartbreaking for last, the Mind Stone. The stone that is Vision. So after a last effort attempt of removing the stone in Wakanda, his lover, Wanda, Scarlet Witch, is forced to destroy it in order for Thanos not to get it. So while holding back Thanos this entire time, she has to kill her lover. She does so successfully, and we felt the pain. The theater sat silent as we tried to comprehend that this actually just happened. But then Thanos uses the most recent installment on his glizzy gauntlet, the Time Stone. He then brings Vision back to life in front of Wanda, grabs him by his neck as well, and then pulls the stone out, leaving Vision's lifeless and colorless body to plop on the ground. And what's crazy about this is that he wasn't even using another Infinity Stone to pull that out. He just digs through vibranium with raw strength and he plucks it out, again like a hangnail.
Number 10. Deceased Batman. In the Deceased universe, the world is infected with an anti-life virus that infects people and turns them into zombies when they look at a screen. This story is apocalyptic in nature, so naturally there are a lot of brutal moments of heroes being killed by the zombie hordes. Probably the most devastating of them is what happens to the Bat family. Nightwing and Tim Drake are infected by the virus and go to Wayne Manor and attack Batman and Alfred. They bite the Dark Knight, infecting him. Alfred is forced to put down Dick and Tim with a shotgun, and Batman tries to slow the infection by getting into one of Mr. Freeze's cryosuits. He puts together a package for Damian containing a batsuit for him and turns. Alfred is forced to put him down with a shotgun and leaves the cave, thinking about how he had to put an end to 3 of his children. To make things even worse, in a later story in this universe, it is discovered that there is actually a cure for the virus, and Alfred has to grapple with the fact that he killed his sons when they could have been saved. Number 9. Old Man Logan. On Earth 800,007,128, where the Old Man Logan story takes place, Captain America's old foe, the Red Skull, managed to organize all of the Earth's supervillains and used them to defeat all of the heroes of their world and take over the United States. As he explained to a dying Captain America, Abomination was given California, although a crazed Hulk gang would eventually take this over. Dr. Doom was given the Bible Belt, and Magneto was given Las Vegas, although this was eventually taken over by the Kingpin. Red Skull took over the White House and installed himself as dictator. Worst of all was how the villains defeated the X-Men. Wolverine was monitoring the situation with Jubilee when the X-Mansion was suddenly attacked by supervillains. As the children fled, Wolverine made a brave final stand against the bad guys, cutting them down one at a time until there were none left. It was then that Mysterio revealed that the whole thing had been an illusion, and Logan had been attacking his own teammates the entire time. This was so devastating that Logan walked away from the situation due to his guilt, letting the villains take over and vowing to never pop his claws again. Number 8. Injustice Superman. One of the most devastating defeats that we've ever seen is the one that broke Superman's spirit and turned him from a hero into a villain. In the world featured in the Injustice games and comics, the Joker has become bored with dealing with Batman and decides to try his luck going up against the Man of Steel. Joker brainwashed Superman into destroying Metropolis as well as Lois Lane and his unborn child. This caused Superman to snap and set aside all the morality that he was known for, and he brutally killed the Joker. This began a chain reaction of events that led to Superman deciding to punish all of the criminals and reshape the world in his image, becoming more unhinged and violent the more power he seized, eventually becoming a full-on dictator, who Batman was was forced to fight with an insurgency. The Joker may not have survived his encounter with Superman, but the fact that he was able to make him destroy everything he loved, break his moral code, and turn into the very thing he was fighting against, plunging the world into a horrifying dystopia, makes this a pretty good win for the Clown Prince of Crime. This Old Man Logan and the Deceased entry would normally rank higher, but as none of these events are canon to the main universe, I've decided to keep them at the bottom of the list so we can focus on defeats that actually happened. Number 7. Alpha Flight Number 12. When the villainous Jerome Jackson discovered that his old employee who had ruined his life, James Hudson, was now a superhero leading Canada's super team Alpha Flight, he vowed revenge and sold Hudson's identity to the evil Roxxon Corporation, who gave him the resources to form the villain team Omega Flight, whose only purpose was to kill Hudson. They set a trap for James, tricking him into moving to New York for a job and then attacking him. Jackson attacked Guardian using the box robot, but Guardian managed to use his suit's power supply to overload the robot, killing Jackson. However, this caused Guardian's suit to overload and blow up, setting him on fire right in front of his wife, Heather. This was obviously deeply traumatic for Heather and the team, and they actually disbanded for a time as a result of this loss. Even when Hudson returned to life a few years later, things were never really the same for him, with his relationship to his wife being consistently strained as a result of his untimely death. So, this is a superhero defeat that has defined the character's entire life going forward, coloring it with an inescapable misery. Number 6. The death of Gwen Stacy. For a lot of his early run as the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn had no memories of his criminal activities, due to the Goblin being a separate personality. Green Goblin tangled with Spider-Man several times over the years, with Goblin eventually swearing to bring misery and pain into Spider-Man's life as revenge for always stopping his schemes. He eventually was able to follow Spidey and watch him change in an alley, discovering that he was really Peter Parker. Osborn eventually became aware of his Goblin side and embraced it, and concocted a scheme to ruin Spider-Man's life. It's not actually a particularly complicated scheme when you think about it. In Amazing Spider-Man number 121, the Green Goblin kidnapped Peter's girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, and then threw her off of a bridge. Spider-Man managed to snag her with a web, but the whiplash caused by her sudden stop caused her to break her neck. So, the Goblin achieved his goal of causing Peter as much pain as possible. Number 5. The death of Superman. When a brutal and savage creature called Doomsday came to Earth, he had only one thing on his mind: destruction. He destroyed a small town and tore through the Justice League as they attacked him. No matter what was thrown at him, Doomsday would not go down. It soon became clear as Doomsday continued to shrug off attacks that this was a job for Superman. Superman went up against the creature as Metropolis bore the brunt of the damage. Doomsday was so powerful that Superman had to use the full force of his powers without holding back at all. He took an incredible beating, but managed to kill the creature in the end. Unfortunately, he had taken so much damage while doing so that he passed away in the arms of a distraught Lois Lane. So really, this fight is more of a tie when you think about it. The world was devastated at the loss of Superman as they mourned their hero in a massive funeral and wondered what would become of them now. Perhaps the most devastating element of this affair was that Superman's parents, John and Martha Kent, weren't able to attend their son's funeral as his secret identity would be compromised, and because Superman was entombed at a Metropolis memorial, they were unable to bury their son and instead had to bury a few of Clark Kent's possessions instead. Number 4. A death in the family. The Joker has made a long career of making Batman miserable by racking up massive body counts while enacting twisted schemes to bring Gotham City to its knees. Batman is usually able to stop the Joker before he achieves his ultimate goal, but sometimes the Clown Prince of Crime gets the better of the Dark Knight. The most infamous example of this was when the Joker captured the second Robin, Jason Todd. He beat him with a crowbar and left him in a warehouse that was rigged to explode. Batman almost got there in time to save Jason, but Robin was blown to smithereens. Batman tried to arrest the Joker, but in a bizarre twist, because the Joker was acting as the ambassador to Iran at the time, he was not charged with the crime due to diplomatic immunity. Batman did stop the Joker from completing completing his plan to gas the UN, but considering that Batman considers losing Jason his greatest failure, that kinda makes it the Joker's greatest win. And considering how much trauma the incident caused Jason once he returned to life, and the fact that it drove him to become a murderous vigilante whose relationship with Batman is tense at best as a result, it has been a long-lasting and fruitful victory for the Ace of Knaves known as the Joker, and a bitter defeat for the Dark Knight. Number 3. The Ultimatum Wave. In Ultimatum, Magneto has been driven mad at the loss of his children, and decides that rather than destroying humanity in order to make the world safe for mutants, he's just gonna kill everyone. He uses a doomsday device and his powers to shift the world off of its axis, causing disasters all over the globe. Much of Europe, including all of Latveria, is frozen under a layer of ice, and New York is hit by a massive tidal wave. Millions of people all over the world die in the attack, including Nightcrawler and Hank McCoy. Magneto then sends out more of his minions to destroy the heroes, causing the brutal deaths of several more heroes, including Hank Pym, Doctor Strange, and Thor, just to name a few. The most devastating moment is when Pym finds his wife Janet being eaten by the Blob, and responds by entering his giant man form, picking up the Blob and biting his head off. Professor X gets personally murdered by Magneto, and all seems lost. The heroes are eventually able to stop Magneto from destroying the rest of the world, but the initial defeat caused millions of deaths of both heroes and civilians, and the resulting anti-mutant sentiment and pain of the survivors changed things in the Ultimate Universe forever. Number 2. Watchmen's Giant Squid. In the Watchmen universe created by Alan Moore, superheroes were outlawed and the United States and Russia are at the brink of nuclear war. The smartest man alive, Adrian Veidt, formerly the hero Ozymandias, came up with a plan to save the world at the cost of millions of lives. He cloned the brain of a murdered psychic and created a giant psychic squid which he planned to teleport into New York, where it would kill millions of people with a psychic attack, making the world think that they were under attack by aliens, causing them to unite against a common threat. It's slightly more complicated than that, but it's kind of hard to explain, and frankly, you should just read Watchmen if you haven't already. His plan was uncovered by the heroes of the book, who went to Veidt's Arctic Palace to confront him and try and stop him, but after explaining his evil plan, he clarified that he had already enacted his plan 35 minutes prior, and that they were too late to stop him. In order to preserve the peace that had been brought about as a result, the heroes were forced to go along with the charade that Ozymandias had concocted. Number 1. Green Lantern loses a planet. In the Cosmic Odyssey series, when the anti-life equation became a sentient creature, it split itself into 4 pieces. These anti-life aspects each went to a different planet, forcing Darkseid and Highfather to team up with Earth's heroes in order to stop them. Martian Manhunter and the Green Lantern John Stewart were sent to the planet Xanshi to deal with the threat and defuse a planet-destroying bomb. The two tracked down the explosive, but feeling that Martian Manhunter was out of his depth, an arrogant Stewart used his power ring to trap Martian Manhunter in a bubble and send him away, telling him that he would only slow him down. Unfortunately, when Green Lantern got to the explosive, he discovered that it had been painted yellow, making him incapable of defusing it with his ring. It went off, and though the ring protected Stewart and Manhunter from the blast, the planet and all of its inhabitants were killed due to the Green Lantern's arrogance and carelessness. Martian Manhunter was understandably furious at Stewart, and the Green Lantern was obviously racked with guilt that never really went away. He certainly grew from the experience, but there are few things more devastating than failing to save an entire planet because you were overconfident in your own abilities.
Bullseye and Deadpool. These guys are just perfect for each other. In Daniel Way's Deadpool, we got to see these guys duke it out multiple times as Norman Osborn has hired Bullseye to take out Deadpool, but it's not the quick and easy job he's hoping it'll be. Bullseye is operating as part of Norman's Dark Avengers, playing the part of Hawkeye, so he's got a pretty neat Hawkeye-inspired costume. These guys have some great showdowns, including the first one that ends with Deadpool taking an arrow straight to the head. Somehow these guys just can't get enough of each other though, and end up at each other's throats again real soon. In a super epic moment later in the story, Bullseye launches a missile at Deadpool, who happens to be driving a huge ass truck at the time. He Tokyo drifts the truck, whipping it sideways, and narrowly misses the rocket, which goes streaming right through the cockpit of the truck. It's a super awesome moment, and these guys have a nice laugh about it afterwards. This duo obviously has a pretty good time trying to kill each other, and that could be the reason that they never actually get the job done. Bullseye winds up having to pay Deadpool off in the end, which is pretty embarrassing when your whole thing is that you're a hitman who never misses. Hey guys, don't forget to take a second to hit that like button, it really helps us out here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 9, Thanos Arrested. Oh man, this one is great. In this issue of Spidey Super Stories, number 39, there's a story called Dog Day Afternoon, where we see Spidey and Cat team up to take on Thanos. The story opens with Thanos buzzing around in his Thanos copter, and then he's all like, whoops, drop the old Infinity Cube, while he's battling with Cat. The two part ways, each hoping to find the cube first, but instead some kid finds it, and it eventually winds up back in Thanos' hands. This leads to a spectacular showdown, chock full of hilarious puns. Seriously, these guys do not let up with the cat and dog puns in this story. Thanos winds up using the cube a second time, causing an earthquake, and the earthquake makes him drop the cube again with a big oops, and this kid from earlier picks it up and uses the cube to subdue Thanos, tying him up in the grass. In the end, Thanos is arrested by the NYPD for his crimes, and it's pretty embarrassing. In fact, the entire story kind of makes Thanos look like an idiot, but it's pretty funny and definitely worth checking out. Number 8, Loki vs. Hulk. This epic moment from Joss Whedon's astonishing X-Men was honored in a glorious way in the first Avengers movie. After leading his alien army into New York and promptly losing to the Avengers, Loki is scheming for a way to change the tide and possibly get ahead when the Hulk shows up. Loki goes on a bit of a tirade about his power and majesty, but the Hulk is not amused. What happens next is a hilarious moment I'm sure you all remember, with Hulk grabbing the puny god and whacking him against the floor and walls with the gusto of a middle-aged man with a Terry's chocolate orange. Loki finds himself quickly buried in rubble and serves as a great reminder that if you're not prepared to take on the Hulk, you probably shouldn't even bring your evil empire to Earth. Number 7, Sabertooth and Wolverine. These two guys have a lengthy history of kicking the crap out of each other, and their origins are even wrapped together, so it kind of seems like they're destined to go toe-to-toe for centuries. Sabertooth is a bit obsessive about Wolverine, seeking him out every year on his birthday and making his life a living hell. Given that they both have a crazy powerful healing factor, you would think that they'd just fight forever like Joker and Batman, but that's before Wolverine finds a sword that can nullify healing factor. He uses it to take out Sabertooth in seconds, slicing clean through his neck and sending his head flying off like a dodgeball. It's a super badass moment, and totally awesome to finally see Sabertooth get what's been coming to him. It's a comic book death though, so before you know it, Sabertooth is getting brought back to life, being brought back from hell by a cult of magic ninjas. That's just the way it goes. Number 6, Ord vs. Colossus. So Colossus technically died in 2001, but it was a comic book death and you know how those go. In 2004, Joss Whedon's run on Astonishing X-Men gave Colossus an epic return as he goes up against the supervillain Ord in issue number 5. Ord is an alien super warrior and a pretty serious dude. He once took on the X-Men by himself before Colossus had joined the team. These two have a bit of a history as Ord experimented on Colossus's body against his will to help create the mutant cure. Experimenting on somebody usually leaves them foaming at the mouth, raging for revenge, and Colossus was definitely ready for some vengeance. Ord asks him, "Do you think you can stand against me because you're made of steel?" To which Colossus responds, "Not steel, rage! I'm made of rage!" And he just totally lays the beat down, even delivering a signature double hammer fist, Hulk style. Number 5. Harley Quinn tragedy. Working with the Joker has got to be taxing mentally, probably even physically demanding, but it's mostly the going insane that you would have to watch out for. Harley Quinn is a great example of this, and her dynamic relationship with Joker has unfolded into all kinds of different directions over the years. During the Death of the Family story, Joker does a whole bunch of super messed up stuff, including walking around wearing his own face that was cut off earlier, and tricking the entire Bat family into thinking he's cut off everyone's faces. If that wasn't bad enough, at one point, Harley winds up at Joker's mercy after he fails to kill her by dumping her in a vat full of chemicals. She wakes up chained to the wall, surrounded by corpses, and Joker drops a bombshell. She is not the first Harley Quinn, and she won't be the last. It's like the ultimate confirmation of her fears that Joker doesn't love her, and he's just using her as a disposable sidekick. It's an epic moment that really highlights the depths of Joker's insanity, and totally a tragic moment for Harley. If you haven't read Death of the Family, I definitely recommend it. although it's a bit on the gruesome side. The artwork is incredible, and there's some really crazy moments. Number 4, Lobo gets decapitated. Harley Quinn is an incredibly popular character, and as such, has some super epic moments and is a great provider of fan service. She knows how to deliver. In the Injustice comic, she actually ends up killing Lobo after getting juiced up by a pill that gives you super strength. Where can I get a prescription for those anyway? Asking for a friend. So Harley sort of teams up with Green Arrow and Black Canary, and the three of them wind up being followed back to Arrow Cave by Lobo. Lobo gets shot in both of his eyes by Green Arrow, and then Canary follows this up with her signature Canary cry. At this point, Harley leaps on top of the main man and tears his head clean off. Lobo is a super powerful dude, so to see him get done dirty like this is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. This event is highlighted by the fact that Harley and Lobo actually once had a short romance, but it definitely was not meant to last. Number 3, Composite Superman. This next one comes from way back in the 1960s, in an issue of World's Finest Comics, number 142, in which Batman and Superman go up against Composite Superman. Also known as Joe Meach, Composite Supes is a total failure in life, and he just wants to be somebody and be remembered. He somehow ends up working as a caretaker in the Superman Museum, and one day, a bolt of lightning strikes some of the superpowered artifacts and gives him the powers of all the members of the Legion of Superheroes. He makes himself a costume that's a mix of Batman and Superman styles, literally just like split down the middle like Two-Face, and he even ends up learning their secret identities. It's a crazy storyline made even crazier by the ending. Composite Superman is totally wiping the floor with Batman and Superman. They don't have a chance, but his memories start to fade away and disappear, and he risks just forgetting everything that he's ever done. In a last-ditch effort, he tries to write some stuff down before he passes out, but just doesn't make it. It's all the more embarrassing as poor Jason Meach just wanted to become somebody, and now not even he will remember that he once had awesome superpowers. Number 2, Lex Luther Cryes. This one comes from the final issue of Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, published in 2006. In the final issue, it seems like Lex might be victorious in the end. He's taken a special concoction that gives him the powers of Superman for 24 hours, and he uses this time to try to take over the entire planet. However, things get really crazy when Clark Kent reveals himself to be Superman and fires a gravity gun at Luthor. Things start getting emotional, and Lex is in this cloud and has kind of an epiphany about the pettiness of his hatred for Superman. Not only does he cry like he just saw the end of Infinity War, but his special concoction wears off too and he loses his powers. Lex starts complaining about how he had a vision and he could have saved the world, but Superman just lays the smackdown on him and says, "You could have saved the world years ago if it mattered to you, Luthor." It's totally awesome. Number 1. Doctor Doom vs. Squirrel Girl. This one is likely one of the most infamous supervillain defeats in Marvel history. The notoriously nefarious Doctor Doom has some seriously epic evil plans, and despite Iron Man's best efforts, he winds up on top, and Iron Man is in a pretty tough spot. Luckily for him, our native nutcracker from the Great Lakes Avengers, Squirrel Girl, shows up and drives Doom to the brink of madness with the help of her furry friends. Thousands of squirrels overwhelm Doctor Doom's ship, chewing on the wires and distracting Doom himself, while Squirrel Girl helps Iron Man to escape and confront Doom. Squirrel Girl has actually taken on some crazy characters in her past, like Wolverine and Deadpool, and even Thanos. However, this defeat of Doctor Doom at her hands and the hands of 1,000 tiny little squirrel hands definitely takes the cake as one of the most embarrassing supervillain defeats ever.
Coming in at number 10, we have Don't Mess with Batman. It will always be somewhat of a mystery as to how Guy Gardner is able to hold on to his lantern ring. The dude is kind of rude and childish, but I will admit he has pulled off some pretty impressive things as a lantern. He's just not what you would expect from a member of the most renowned space cops, and there have been plenty of times when Guy has crossed the line, like when he was forced to work under Batman with the Justice League International. Guy didn't think this made any sense. Why was a dude in a bat suit telling him what to do? Why was Guy Gardner not the one who was running the team? So Guy kept going on about how he should have been at the helm. He was whining, complaining, and insulting Batman. So Batman wanted to get everyone in order the fastest way possible and one-punched Guy Gardner. He literally knocked the dude out. A Green Lantern in one shot. So if Guy had any questions about who should be in charge, they would have all been answered as soon as he woke up and put his nose back in place. This was hero on hero, but for Guy this was still pretty damn embarrassing to get floored from one shot. Coming in at number 9 we have the Lantern Club. I mean, if I was a villain with super strength I would have done the same move. It's really killing two birds with one stone, or two supers with one super. If you flip open the comic Countdown to Crisis issue 3, you will see two heroes squaring off against one villain. In the hero's corner you have Troya and Hal Jordan, a powerful team up that would normally come out victorious. And in the villain's corner we have Mary Marvel, a villain that sounds like she should be in a straight to DVD Christmas special, but in this encounter she showed that she's no slouch. When she takes on the two do-gooders, she quickly knocks down Troya and then snags Hal by his ankle and then proceeds to beat Troya with Hal using the lantern like a club. And just like that you have both of them bloodied and beaten. Really, that was the most effective way to get the job done. Coming in at number 8 we have Spider-Man versus the Spot. The Spot will go down as one of the worst Spider-Man villains ever, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't able to get one over on Spidey. For those of you who don't know, the Spot is a villain that is covered with small portals all over his body. Think of him as the game portal, where you go in one portal and you come out the other, even if it defies the laws of physics. In their encounter, Spider-Man tries to punch the Spot and ends up clocking himself in the face. It was like a grade school bully going, "Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself." Coming in at number 7 we have Pants, Punched, and KO'd. Not all supers come from Marvel and DC, so when I get a chance I like to sneak in some moments from outside the superhero norms. For this one we're gonna head into the world of anime to one of my favorite shows, My Hero Academia. In season 1 we have the Sports Festival, where new promising heroes go up against each other for the entertainment of the people. In this tournament we see Aoyama, who has a belly laser power similar to Cyclops, but it comes out of his stomach. He goes up against Ashido, who has acid powers. The two square off in a short scrap that ends with Ashido blasting Aoyama's belt line with acid. This causes his pants to fall down and Ashido slides in and uppercuts him unconscious. So getting knocked out while you're scrambling to pull up your pants, yeah, that's one of the worst ways to go out. Coming in at number 6 we have Packing on the Pounds. You only have to look at comic books for about 4 seconds to get enough unrealistic body standards to give an entire generation of people body dysmorphia. So when one hero puts on enough pounds that he couldn't even use his powers, that really sticks out, especially when your power is how fast you can move. I mean, if this was to happen to the Blob, I don't think anyone would notice. Being big is kind of his thing. Who were we talking about? Well, of course, the Flash. When we zoom back to the Silver Age of comics, we find an issue when one of the Flash's arch enemies, Gorilla Grodd, comes up with a plan to stop the speedster from running, and it's simple but effective. He makes him get so fat that he can't use his powers anymore. Grodd zaps the Flash with a ray that makes him retain water without him knowing. This made him bulk up until he literally weighed a ton. It would be pretty embarrassing to go from the fastest man alive to the star of My 600-Pound Life. Coming in at number 5 we have Wolverine Gets a Girl's Touch. Known for being one of the coolest characters in the Marvel Universe, it must have hurt to have his body tossed through building after building from one shot from a 12-year-old girl. In issue 12 of The Runaways, Wolverine is hot on the tail of Cloak. He eventually tracks down Cloak, and lo and behold, he's being protected by Molly Hayes, aka Princess Powerful. He tries to negotiate, but things turn violent pretty quickly. Downside for Logan is that Molly is probably one of the strongest mutants ever, and with one touch he's fired out of there like a snot rocket in the shower. Getting beat up by a girl must have not been the easiest emotional scar to get rid of. Coming at number 4 we have the Yellow Room. Lanterns are very particular about colors. Some are good, some are bad, and there's a spectrum, blah 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 blah. While in All-Star Batman and Robin, we see Hal Jordan get pranked, triggered, and beat up by his least favorite color, yellow. Batman is going out of his way to mess with Hal Jordan, decides to explore his artistic side and paint a room yellow. That's quite the statement. This of course sets Hal off when he walks in, but I don't think he was ready for what was about to happen next. A young Robin slips in and manages to pickpocket Hal's ring right off his finger, and then the teenager whoops his ass. Losing your ring, getting humiliated in a yellow room, and getting KO'd by a teenager, that is a rough one. Coming in at number 3, we have Superman is trusting and dumb. Not how you would think to describe the Man of Steel, but when you hear how Lex Luthor was able to trick him, you'll be on my side. There was a comic where Superman is approached by a tailor, a guy who seemed to be a kind fellow who just wanted to do a good deed for the man who keeps the city safe. You can tell that this is an older comic. When was the last time a tailor approached you randomly and offered to make you a suit? Well, this mystery man offers to give the Man of Steel a brand new suit that will freshen up his image. Superman thinks this is amazing and accepts. The tailor makes him this suit, and without questioning anything, he puts it on. I think this might have been a case of superhero privilege. You think that you should be getting gifts from strangers at any time of the day. Well, it turns out this generous tailor was actually Lex Luthor in disguise. You think the world's greatest hero would be on the watch for the one person who's trying to kill him 24/7, but I guess he let this one slip. Oh, and there's more. Lex Luthor planted a trap in the suit. He sewed a lead-covered clump of kryptonite into the suit, which Superman never noticed. He didn't take the half second to look at the suit with his X-ray vision. Nope, there's literally a bomb in his clothes that will expose him to his weakness at the worst moment, and it was given to him in person by his arch-enemy. Lex Luthor would have had to put Superman through a whole fitting process, and he still didn't pick up on it. Coming in at number 2, we have Tin Can Iron Man. As time goes on, we have seen heroes and villains become more intricate. The way that they fight, how they can be beaten, how they use their powers. For the most part, all of these things have become more exciting. But when some heroes were originally crafted, they didn't have such interesting pieces to them. For this slip up, let's head all the way back to Avengers number 2. In this issue, the team of Earth's mightiest heroes has an enemy they never thought they would have to face, themselves. Well, kinda. See, they take on Space Phantom. This is a villain who can copy any form exactly. There's literally nothing off about his imitations, and this was his plan to beat the Avengers by turning them on each other. This was Civil War before Civil War. At first the Avengers are fooled, but then they learn his tricks, and while the Space Phantom is a perfect imitation of Iron Man, Thor is able to stop him by making it rain. And not in the cool way, he didn't throw a stack of cash in his face. Literally, rain comes down and it rusts the perfect imitation of Iron Man so he can't move. I know some of you at home are going to complain because it was Space Phantom that was beaten and not Iron Man, but it was a perfect imitation of Iron Man, meaning that Iron Man could have also be beaten by rust, which is one of the most embarrassing things that Iron Man could have learned about himself. And coming into the number 1 spot, we have the Justice League losing to Killer Frost. There's no shortage of villains that have ice powers. When it comes to Killer Frost, she's okay. She's never really had a moment to shine. She isn't really a villain that any S-tier hero would even bother with. She would be happy to see Elastic Man show up to fight her. But there was one time when her and the Suicide Squad were taking on the Boy in Blue, and Enchantress was able to smash Superman so hard he was laying on the ground immobilized. Soup has always had trouble with magic users. Well, Killer Frost was there and saw this as a golden opportunity. She used her powers to suck Superman's energy dry, draining him of his life force and his powers. She then flew off and took out the entire Justice League. Now, while it being hard for anyone from the League to take down someone that powerful, the fact that they let someone like Killer Frost get the drop on them, that is pretty embarrassing. This is one of the biggest upsets in comic book history.
Number 10, clowned around. Okay, we're going back old school for this one right off the bat. Kathy Kane entered Detective Comics in issue 233. She was a circus trapeze artist who turned into Batman, the usual, you know? She was a pretty big deal in comics. She was around from 1956 to 1979, so she was around for 252 issues. She was a part of the Bat family. So what happened? How did she go out? Was it heroic? No, not at all. How did a well-trained Batwoman get taken out? Well, let's answer that question. Now, at this point, she was retired. She was still running a circus, but nonetheless, she was retired. She wasn't choking out bad guys anymore. The League of Assassins find her, and then it turns into this brawl, even with Batman showing up at one point. Now, Batman is useless. He gets knocked out, and then when he wakes up, everything's done. The action's done. Kathy Kane is on the ground, holding onto her batsuit, and that's the end of her. That's the last time we see her. That is issue 485. That's the end of Kathy Kane. Okay, there's no big fight, really. There's no closing statement. She didn't save Batman's life. She didn't save anyone at the circus to, you know, it's just, we don't see it. Just a big L. Just a big old L. Readers were upset because all this time, and that's how you write Kathy Kane out, just to make Batman darker and to make his arc more cool and Gotham-like. Sure, okay. Number 9, Forgotten Foe. In Avengers issue 57, Vision joins the team. Now the issue is pretty deep because the team is trying to figure Vision out, where he came from, what his demeanor is, all that jazz. All he knows is that Ultron created him to attack the Avengers, which is pretty threatening from a guy who can walk through walls. So we start asking Hank Pym what he knows, but amnesia makes that a difficult task. Now he finally remembers what happened. He remembers that Ultron started to become a problem. So Hank turned himself into Goliath to defend himself, but in doing so, he went super big and he hit his head off the ceiling of the room he was in. Because, of course that happened. Hank's head versus stucco. He grew big and then he knocked himself out, and that's why he couldn't remember anything. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense. Pretty embarrassing, but it checks out. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be super awesome. It's super helpful for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now let's get right back to this list. Number 8, Paint It Yellow. All-star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder. The duo goes toe-to-toe with Green Lantern, and the trick here, if you want to beat the crap out of a Green Lantern, is to paint everything yellow. If the Simpsons family got naked and fought Green Lantern, there's a good chance they might win. Green Lantern is surprised by this 12-year-old boy's decision. He honestly undermines him. But readers were just surprised that he stuck around in the yellow room anyways. I mean, he just kept punching and he was kind of losing. Batman was beating him up a lot. And Batman was distracting him, so at the same time, Boy Wonder steals the power ring from Green Lantern. If you're not gonna use it, you might as well lose it. See ya. He then gets beat up even more. Like, dude, did they paint the town yellow or just this room? Walk into the room, be like, hey guys, I'll see you in the lobby. Good luck. Number 7, Robin's Hurdle. So sure, Robin's pretty sweet being able to sneak the ring off and all, but what if I told you that athletic equipment stopped Robin dead in his tracks once before? Teen Titans Volume 1, Issue 4, way back in the 60s. The team was curious when a young sprinter won a race to qualify for the Olympics, but he just kept running after, like he was cursed, which is pretty scary if you think about it. Imagine not being able to stop running, like Forrest Gump style. Ooh. Scary. Now at the same time, Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy needed their help as well because he was being attacked when he was practicing for some Olympic stuff as well. Some guy tried to sabotage his arrows. This organization called Diablo was behind it all. So there's a clear type of villain out here with a clear project. So the Teen Titans traveled to Tokyo just to make sure the Olympics went smoothly, and Diablo met them there. He took the team down so easily, and Robin gets caught because he can't break out of 5 loose hurdles. And that's it. That's the nail in the coffin. The entire team at that point is captured and put in the rings of the Olympics. And then of course, our guest Titan is blindfolded and is about to shoot a bunch of arrows. What a mess. Now eventually Speedy figures it out and the team is saved, but like Speedy had to save all of them. Number 6, Mugged with a Crossbow. Green Lantern, Green Arrow, issue 85. This is so insane. Now the issue is front and center and it's talking about narcotics. So already it's like a very aggressive issue. The first few pages, we see Oliver Queen walking at night and he's in a bad mood. There's some girl problems and some punks try and rob him. Now, it's not like he was tired. He didn't just come back from saving the day. He was actually in a pretty bad mood. Like I said, he had lady troubles. He was ready to fight. He was actually looking for a fight. He was glad they came along. Otherwise, he said he'd have to go home and punch the walls instead. Kyle style, you know? He was ready to go and he was fighting these punks off that were trying to rob him. And then one of them pulled out a crossbow because apparently it's Van Helsing and then, you know, muggers have crossbows all of a sudden. And then Ollie gets shot through the shoulder. He didn't even like regard the guy. He's like, oh, arrows. I know my way around that. Like, it's still an arrow. You're still made of skin. Of course. Number 5, Tony and Dr. Doom. So before we talk about this one, we're gonna fill you in a little bit on Doreen Green. She made her comic book debut in Marvel Superheroes Volume 2, Issue 8, back in the early 90s. Now she was born with these squirrel-like abilities. Her name is Squirrel Girl. She has a tail. Right, you get it. She learned that she could communicate with squirrels at a young age. She was 10. So in an early comic book, she took on Dr. Doom at one point. In Marvel Superheroes issue 8, she bumps into Tony Stark and she's showing off, right? She wants him to see what she can do. It's pretty impressive for a pitch. Squirrels start coming in out of nowhere. It's like a musical. It's nice. And then she commands them all to jump onto Tony, and even he's impressed. He's like, wow, this is crazy. And then in comes Dr. Doom to make things even more crazy. Doom interrupts Stark's electronics, and just like that, Tony is out of the fight, which was going to be my main point here. But in order to save Tony, Squirrel Girl had to send a horde of squirrels onto Doom's ship to get him out. That's how Tony Stark needs to be saved, a bunch of squirrels. Now these squirrels weren't part of the Avengers. They were just able to be controlled by Doreen. So no idea how these squirrels with little hands took down Dr. Doom. They didn't even get a chance to fight. Dr. Doom saw all this and he was like, I'm out of here. The Avengers, I can fight. A bunch of squirrels? No, that's where I draw the line. And then Doreen later joined the Avengers in their 2017 run. What a time. Number 4, Wolverine gets even more ripped. In our last video, we broke down some Ultimate Wolverine facts and his super cool adamantium skeleton that isn't as strong as it is in our regular Marvel 616 universe. Now, it still sounds like a pretty good time. You have adamantium laced into your bones, like the Terminator almost. But one time, Magneto used that weakened adamantium against him. It's just as horrible as you're probably imagining. This all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event, and honestly, I got goosebumps reading this. The adamantium mixed with his bones wasn't that strong, so Magneto pulled the adamantium out and it was like water coming out of his body. It was loose, it was liquidy, and it probably didn't feel good. Professor X thankfully wiped his mind after he healed, which is great, but what about us? I need my mind erased after I just saw that. Are you kidding? It's gonna live in my head rent-free. Number 3, The Flash vs. Turtle Man. The Flash is the fastest man alive, but in his debut comic, it was a bit of a rocky start for the Scarlet Speedster. In Showcase issue 4, his powers are presented to him. He sees food in the air, it's a great time, it's super speedster. Now when Barry comes across the slowest man on Earth, the Turtle Man, appropriately named, it's actually quite challenging. It takes him a few tries to get to him. Barry runs into a wall at first because there's a painting on it and he thought that was Turtle Man. So he runs into it Roadrunner style. He runs right through the wall. Bonk, okay, weird. And then the chase continues because Turtle Man gets in a rowboat and takes off in the water. But Barry doesn't have a boat, right? But no boat, no problem. Barry now realizes he can run on water. So now the fight should be over in at least 3 seconds. Barry still can't get a hold of this guy in a rowboat. He keeps running by him and he's just missing the boat. It's so infuriating. Now eventually Barry whips a few donuts around him, but I mean, it's not like the rowboat was doing zigzags. He was going 3 miles an hour, just straight. Number 2, The Punch. This one comes from Justice League issue 5. Now in this comic, Batman came in to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. He makes it pretty clear for more than one issue that he doesn't like this new leader. Although Batman is clearly a better fit, but whatever. So he got so upset that he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring. So Batman's like, all right, let's do this. And then Batman knocked him out with one punch. Blue Beetle got jazzed. He was like Joe Rogan at a UFC night. He was like, one punch, one punch. Oh my God, he was losing his mind. This is a great moment and a greater lesson. Don't take the ring off that makes you a superhero, or else you're just a regular guy fighting Batman. Literally. And finally, number 1, Bruiser vs. Wolverine. Runaways issue 12. We see Logan and Molly Hayes, aka Bruiser, have a rather quick fight. Now, at this time, Wolverine wasn't a member of the New Avengers, and he's trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Dagger. So he, Cap, and Iron Man went to find help from the Runaways, seeing as the signs were leading to Cloak being responsible. Now, Molly, right off the bat, okay, she's one of the strongest superheroes ever, but how she handled Wolverine was way too easy, especially now that he's an Avenger, like he's on the top of his game. So the big 3 walk into the cathedral. Cap calmly asks her to stop screaming, and Wolverine and him are not going to hurt her. The screaming continues, and Wolverine asks if she's heard of heightened senses, right? It probably didn't feel good. He gives her 3 seconds to stop drilling a hole into his brain. He counts 3, 2, and then the next page he was outside face down in the snow. Just like that. One hit, bam, he was eliminated. And then when he comes back in, he's actually embarrassed. I mean, fair. He just whispers how he won't tell anybody about tonight if they don't. It's kind of funny. Then he brushes snow off, but like, you're an Avenger, Wolverine. Come on, you should have seen any of this coming.
And at number 10, Green Lantern and Troia. This one comes from Countdown to Final Crisis issue 3 and features an evil Mary Marvel, who Green Lantern and Troia attempt to take out. Those are 2 foes who don't really go down all that easy, if we're being honest. Well, maybe Green Lantern, but more on that later. Mary manages to get the upper hand on them. After knocking out Green Lantern, she grabs hold of his ankle and then uses him as a weapon to club the crap out of Troia, beating her unconscious, which apparently makes the sound effect whap 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 whap, in case you ever just want to know what Hal Jordan's body colliding with another body sounded like. For you curious Hal Jordan fans out there. And at number 9, Bruiser and Wolverine. So Wolverine is by no means a superhero that goes down without a fight, or easily. But for this member of the Runaways, knocking Logan down was no big deal. This happened in Runaways Volume 2, Issue 12. Now for context, Bruiser, aka Molly Hayes, aka Princess Powerful, is the youngest member of the Runaways. She's the sole mutant on the team, and her powers, despite her parents being telepathic mutants, are that of superhuman strength and invulnerability. She knocks Wolverine out in one punch, with him going flying and landing into a snowbank. muttering to himself, "Only 198 mutants left on the stinking planet, and that girl's gotta be one of them." And at number 8, Punisher vs. Bruiser. Yeah, another Bruiser one! If you thought Wolverine's defeat via Bruiser Molly Hayes was bad, Punisher's is like 10 times worse. In Runaways issue 26, when the team are posing as a crime syndicate as part of a plan to take down Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, they cross paths with the Punisher. And guess what? Poor Frank Castle has no clue what they're really doing. He thinks he's going after the crime syndicate. Frank holds a gun to chase Stein's head, another member of the Runaways, only to be met by Molly's fist colliding with his gut. Castle goes down immediately. And you know it's more than just his body that ached. His ego was clearly bruised as well. Oh. And at number 7, Superboy. It should be no surprise that we've included a crippling, embarrassing defeat from the Silver Age on this list. Many a story, especially as far as DC is concerned, were quite wacky back in that era, including this one, The Surrender of Superboy from Superboy issue 110. In front of a massive crowd of people, Superboy and Krypto are challenged to a game of tug-of-war by a scrawny old man. But the catch is, this old man ain't a regular pensioner. He's Merlin the Wizard in disguise. Merlin uses magic to win the match, which humiliates Superboy and Krypto in front of a massive crowd gathered in Smallville. Merlin reveals the truth at the end after being victorious, but hey, that's still pretty embarrassing. I mean, Krypto can walk away from that, he is an adorable dog. Superboy? Not so much. And at number 6, Batman vs. Wonder Woman. Batman is generally the one embarrassing other heroes from time to time, but in this case it's Wonder Woman who hands him his butt on a platter. In the 2002 graphic novel Wonder Woman the Hecate, our hero takes part in an ancient ritual called the Hecate, in which she's honor bound to protect a young woman who comes a-knockin' on her doorstep named Danielle. Turns out Batman has been hot on Danielle's heels after she committed a crime. Batman, searching for the fugitive, tracks Danielle all the way to Wonder Woman, in which Diana tells Bats that she can't let him have her, and proceeds to wail on him, knocking him down onto the street in front of astonished civilian eyes. Later, Batman tries to get the girl again, but this time Diana really lets him have it, ending their conflict with her stomping her boot on top of his head until he finally gives in and tells Wonder Woman that she wins. To be fair, Danielle committed a crime because she was in a very precarious situation, which Wonder Woman totally gets, and Batman's like, no mercy, not gonna do it, and then Wonder Woman's just like, bam, bitch. Up next, number 5, Dollar Bill. Compared to most of the other superheroes on this list, Dollar Bill from Watchmen doesn't actually have superpowers. Rather, he's a superhero who is sponsored by a bank, so he doesn't even have Batman's genius intellect or all of the other things that Batman's. Now, despite the original Night Owl calling him a straight shooter and a stand-up guy, he's also a major misogynist and super homophobic, which makes it a little easier to feel less bad for him. Dollar Bill's embarrassing defeat also resulted in his death. This happened when his cape got stuck in a revolving door and he was shot point blank in the face by a criminal, who was like, hey, he's trapped, I'm just gonna... definitely not the most heroic way to go. And at number 4, Doctor Strange gets choked. The Ultimatum story arc in the Marvel Ultimates universe is filled with a lot of controversial and brutal superhero deaths, but perhaps one of the worst is Doctor Strange's while fighting his mystic nemesis Dormammu. During battle, Dormammu takes Strange's cape and strangles him with it, something you'd think the Sorcerer Supreme would be able to get out of, or at least avoid, considering he is the Sorcerer Supreme. But nope, he's strangled to death in one of the most graphic and embarrassing panels in the storyline. Look at his face, it's so purple. Ugh. And at 3, Changeling. If you thought being strangled by your own cape in battle is bad, then this one is definitely going to make you cringe. Changeling, aka Beast Boy, was defeated in a much different manner. Off of the battlefield, actually. But it was a direct attack to his narcissistic nature. During the famous Judas Contract story arc, Deathstroke and Terra, the latter whom Beast Boy had romantic feelings for, decide to take Gar out in a more creative manner. Deathstroke sends Changeling a bunch of letters from fans, requesting autographs from the young superhero. Gar starts signing them all and licks a bunch of envelopes to send the signed photos to his adoring fanbase. Except, those envelopes, the glue on them was drugged, meaning he's been licking poison paper, and of course he gets knocked out because of it. Definitely not a story he would want to tell his fellow teammates. Vanity hurts, friends. And at number 2, Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Batman has always had beef with Green Lanterns. While his particular grudge over Hal Jordan had to do with the Green Lantern being possessed by Parallax and causing all sorts of trouble, when it comes to another particular Lantern, Guy Gardner, Bruce just doesn't really like him all that much, which is like totally easy to understand because Guy is a very unlikable guy, and Guy really gets on the Caped Crusader's nerves in Justice League issue 5. So Batman knocks out Guy with one punch in front of all of their fellow Justice League International peers. It's embarrassing as hell for him. In Batman's defense though, for 4 issues prior to that one, Guy was incredibly obnoxious and had a real issue with Batman calling the shots as a leader of sorts. Batman finally breaks, punching Guy out, breaking his nose, and leaving him unconscious on the ground while everyone else looks on in awe and wonder. This shuts Guy up for like a few issues, putting him in his place. But you can never really shut up Guy Gardner, can ya? And finally, in at number 1, Hal Jordan in the Yellow Room. By now you know that Green Lanterns have a history of getting their butts kicked in not so pleasant ways, so naturally we're ending off this list with yet another Green Lantern humiliating defeat. This one is from Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin. You know, the comic where Batman is a complete dick and verbally abuses Robin a whole lot. But it's not just Robin who gets the short end of the stick from Bruce, it's also his favorite buddy Hal Jordan. Aside from sassing the hell out of him, at one point Batman literally paints an entire room yellow in spite of Hal, then proceeds to torment him all while the Boy Wonder, who's basically been on the job as a superhero for like a day at this point, surprises Hal, steals his Green Lantern ring, and then proceeds to beat him up. So not only is he triggered by the color yellow, which like is a thing that triggers Hal Jordan, it's like, dude, what is it like getting your ass handed to you by a preteen? Not fun, based on Hal's expression in these panels.
Number 10, Sentry. And the circle of people getting ripped in half continues. It's a vicious circle indeed, let me tell you. Sentry is often actually a perpetrator of this kind of gruesome and brutal death, but this time around he was on the receiving half of this murder method. This all went down during the King in Black event. When Null first arrived on Earth, Sentry was one of the first heroes to attempt to stand up against him and defeat him. Being the Sentry, he egotistically assumed he would easily be powerful enough to defeat Null. While Sentry tried to rip him in half, it was Null who managed to get a solid enough grip on Bob Reynolds to tear him asunder. Sentry would then be escorted by Valkyrie, aka Jane Foster, to the halls of Valhalla, and while on their way there, another shocking revelation would come to light. That some of the Valkyries were still alive, trapped but alive, and upon being found by Jane and Sentry and freed, were able to kind of return once more. Pretty cool. It should be noted too that Sentry's death and defeat was also so shocking because it took place in issue number 1 of the King in Black series, in essence being one of the defeats that kicked off this event.
Elektra. You could say that Elektra was a victim of the well-known Daredevil villain Bullseye, but you could also say she was a victim of Frank Miller's gripping and at times very dark writing. In issue number 181 of Daredevil Volume 1, we watch Elektra and Bullseye square off in a bloody battle, which ultimately ends in Bullseye spearing Elektra right through the stomach and out her back. It's a really brutal event that changes Daredevil as a character entirely from that point on. And it's important to remember that in 1982, which is when that issue was released, a death like this for such a well-known hero wasn't quite as common as what we might be used to today. And it's not like she was resurrected again either, which is usually how this type of thing goes. She is completely done in the Daredevil timeline, only showing up in her own limited series and a couple other comics here and there.
Number 8, Batman. Although it doesn't seem surprising on paper, when Batman was seemingly killed by Darkseid, it caught a lot of folks off guard. That is because Batman is such a mainstay. He isn't a character that dies often, and definitely not in a way that feels as permanent as this if he does die. Although the idea of Batman being killed by Darkseid might not seem that surprising, because I mean Darkseid's pretty OP, Batman actually had a pretty decent plan for taking the villain out, and actually was successful using a Radion bullet. Batman successfully hit Darkseid in the chest, but not before his Omega beams could do their work. Although it seemed as though Batman was obliterated as a result of being hit by the Omega beams, it turned out that what had actually happened was a power called the Omega Sanction, which is also kind of what Darkseid's Omega beams are. And those had been used to transport Batman back through time, so he would return, but not before having weird time travel adventures.
Wolverine. While Wolverine has faced his death at the hands of Sentinels before, which actually results in his death, sort of, I figured that I would cover one of his defeats that doesn't really end in his death, but I'd say it's even more shocking and brutal, so here it is. It's when the Punisher shoots Wolverine in the face and then decides to run him over with a steamroller. This shocking and quite ridiculous defeat takes place in The Punisher number 17 and is rather uncalled for given how brutal it is. Wolverine is just sort of intervening in one of Frank Castle's missions, which, to be fair, Wolverine does do a lot, but it doesn't constitute shooting his face skin off and then flattening him into the ground with a steamroller. It's just a rough scene to witness, and I think the Punisher needs to apologize.
Number 6. Tim Drake. Recently, Robin, Tim Drake, had a big glow up. He came out as bisexual and was celebrated in his very own Pride issue. However, even the fact that the character seems to be coming up more into his own and uplifted for his sense of identity could not protect him from an awful demise that was just around the corner. Enter Batman issue number 125. Here, Batman and Robin go up against Penguin and come face to face as well with Clayface. But what makes it even worse is while they were attempting to evacuate a charity gala whose attendees' lives Penguin was threatening, Robin got taken out by a goon with a gun. Just a goon with a gun. Ugh, brutal. While Robin would be stabilized, it was pretty shocking to see a character who had recently been so celebrated for identity and diversity taken out so easily and on the brink of life or death. Also, note to self, never attend a charity gala in Gotham. It pretty much never ends well.
Captain Marvel, or Marvel, the dude one. This is sort of a sad entry because he isn't defeated by any one villain, nor does he come back from it like some others may on this list. The culprit in this case is actually cancer. I don't know what happened in 1982, but this event was also published in 1982 like the Elektra thing, and was actually known as the first graphic novel to be released by Marvel. It was called The Death of Captain Marvel, of course, and it chronicled the adventures of Marvel venturing into a dark dimension where he's exposed to Compound 13, which is a nerve gas that gives him an incurable cancer. He's then visited by friends on the planet Titan, even getting a courtesy convoy sent over by the Skrulls, who pay their respects in his final moments. The craziest part about this is that Captain Marvel doesn't ever come back, save for one time when the Grandmaster brings him back briefly as a kind of ghost, but other than that, he's known to be out of the comics for good after this one. Sad.
Number 4. Captain Kate. One of the most shocking defeats and demises happened not really to just Kate, but also to Lockheed. Poor Lockheed. Not Lockheed, leave Lockheed alone. This all went down in volume 1 of Marauders from 2020. At the end of issue number 6, Kitty Pryde faces off with Sebastian Shaw, who, while considered to be a mutant who is allied with the nation of Krakoa, and so in that respect is technically a hero, I guess, has also a history of being a really nasty villain. And that is exactly what he was up to here. He kills Kate in cold blood by exploiting her weakness that at the time she struggled to phase through Krakoan organic material and gates. So he found some fast growing vine pods and unleashed them on her while trapping Lockheed in a net, which he then dropped into the sea, and then promptly sinking the boat she was aboard. One of the worst things about this too is Kate is even like, look, you can have all the seats on the Hellfire Trading Company. I don't care, just please let me save Lockheed. And Shaw's like, no. Considering that Kate was basically the main character of this series who possibly could not be resurrected, it was pretty shocking at the time. I was shocked. I was very shocked.
At number 3 is Superman. Back in 1992, a comic book called The Death of Superman was published, in which Superman is actually killed by Doomsday. The battle rages on for quite a while against this hyper-adaptable villain, with Superman showing serious signs of exhaustion as Metropolis gets more and more damaged. This being a multi-issue publication, the actual death of Superman takes place in issue number 75, which is quite a while into the series. And while it's easy for us to find that issue online today, back then, readers were waiting months to see what happened to their favorite Kryptonian. I mean, with a title like that and leaving the event right to the end, I sort of rank this as more of a publicity stunt than anything else, but whether there is marketing involved or not, there's no doubt that this event was a shock to fans, who at the time were unsure if they'd ever see another Superman comic again. Thankfully though, but also sort of expectedly, DC then released Reign of the Supermen, which chronicled the return of the hero and is known to have sold just about the same number of copies as The Death of Superman.
Number 2. Green Arrow. Green Arrow's death was quite startling because he was basically kind of the person behind it. Rather than do something, he sort of just let himself be killed and defeated. And I know there's probably going to be Oliver Queen fans in the comments. They're going to be like, no, he sacrificed himself. But look, it just seems a little silly to me, okay? While beaten by the enemy, he also just kind of gave up. This all went down when Oliver Queen was blown up by a bomb that threatened to detonate upon arriving in Metropolis. Rather than let that happen or give up his arm, which was stuck in the detonator case or chamber, he decided to just surrender and sacrifice himself to save innocent people, allowing himself and the plane he was in to basically be blown up. The really crazy part of this story is that Superman was right there, and while he wasn't coming up with any amazing ideas, other than one that would cause Green Arrow to lose his arm in exchange for his life, which Green Arrow was definitely not willing to do, Soup still likely could have done something else that would save Metropolis and Ollie, and likely have allowed him to keep his arm as well, because after all, this is Superman we're talking about. If only he'd had the time to think of something better. It is hard to think of things on the spot, especially when, you know, a bomb is about to explode, so fair enough.
Finally, at number 1, we have Peter Parker. I only don't call him Spider-Man in this entry because firstly, this is the Earth 1610 Peter Parker, and secondly because he's from the Ultimate Spider-Man series. And either way, the Spider-Man mantle is still very much alive, obviously. But this is still one of the most brutal and unexpected defeats for any superhero, partly because Peter Parker is still only a teenager in this issue where he meets his fate. That, and partly also because his final battle takes place right outside of his house in front of his friends and family. Facing off against the Sinister Six in a multi-issue battle, Peter is entirely helpless, getting ravaged over and over again by the group of villains, and no one really comes to his rescue, other than Aunt May, who actually takes out Electro with a revolver. Spanning between issues 156 and 160 of Ultimate Spider-Man, this loss takes its time and ends with deafening silence as Aunt May and MJ cry over Peter's dead body, and the series just ends. It's a rough defeat that some people forget about, maybe because it's not from our dimension. But hey, it's still a young Spider-Man dying at the hands of a huge gang of bad guys, no matter which way you splice it.